What if you could read people the way an open book, spotting truth behind a smile, motives behind a pause, and the tiny tells that decide who succeeds and who stalls? In this video, we unpack Aidan McCoy's How to Analyze People and give you a practical toolkit, fast, usable signals, exact questions that reveal intent, and one simple calibration trick that makes your first impression 5 times more accurate. Stay until the end. I'll teach you a 3-second test you can use in any conversation that instantly separates bluff from honesty and turns social guesswork into predictable advantage. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Why accurate people analysis wins. What if you could walk into a room and instantly know who will listen, who will resist, and who will quietly become your ally? Accurate people analysis isn't about guessing or playing detective. It's about learning a disciplined way to translate visible behavior into useful hypotheses you can test ethically and quickly. Aidan McCoy opens with a fundamental shift. Stop trying to read minds and start reading systems, physiology, context, and consistency. The body, the environment, and the history between people form a 3-part signal set that, when combined, gives you powerful predictive capacity. Start with first principles. Physiology is the fastest channel. Breathing, posture, micro-expressions, and timing leak current states of arousal and intention. Context is the second channel. What happened immediately before this interaction, and what roles are active. A curt reply at a memorial service means something different than the same reply in a sales call. Consistency is the slow channel. What someone does over days, not minutes, reveals their habits and values. McCoy teaches a practical triage. When you meet someone new, gather 3 facts quickly. Baseline behavior in the first 60 seconds, 1 contextual anchor, where you met, who introduced you, what was just said, and 1 micro change after a mild probe. The baseline gives you the expected rhythm. The contextual anchor reweights interpretation. The micro change reveals flexibility or concealment. Use that triage to form a single, testable hypothesis. This person seems cautious and status-aware. They will prefer slow commitment. Test it with a small ask that costs little but signals commitment. Do they accept a short follow-up call or require more social proof? McCoy insists on ethics. Use analysis to reduce friction and increase clarity, not to manipulate or exploit vulnerabilities. The book gives one immediate experiment. Over the next week, practice the triage on 5 strangers in non-consequential settings: a barista, a neighbor, a cashier, a meeting attendee, a ride-share driver. For each, note baseline breathing pattern, 1 contextual factor, and whether a low-cost probe produced a micro-change. Record your hypothesis and whether it held. Most errors are not in noticing, they are in failing to triangulate across channels. If a person's voice is steady but their hands tremble, avoid concluding confident immediately. Look for context. Were they interrupted? Did they just receive a message? The best readers hold hypotheses lightly and prioritize 2 converging signals before acting. McCoy also introduces the idea of polite curiosity as your default posture. When you're curious, you ask 1 open question that invites correction and provides data. I noticed you hesitated. What did that make you think? That single line does 2 things. It gives information and signals that you respect agency. Over weeks, you will notice patterns. Some people's micro-signals are stable, others are strategic. The difference matters. Strategic behavior is often performance, more brittle and responsive to social cues, while stable patterns are habit. Adaptive analysis privileges both speed and stage. Use fast reads for conversational flow and slow reads for decisions that matter. The payoff of disciplined analysis is simple and generous, fewer missteps, faster trust, and decisions that fit reality rather than wishful thinking. Learn the triage, test one hypothesis per interaction, and treat people as agents, not puzzles. That's the foundation McCoy builds before you move into the specifics of faces, voice, and microbehavior in the chapters that follow. Chapter 2. Faces, Expressions, and the Truth Behind a Smile. Faces are the headline of human behavior, but headlines mislead when read alone. McCoy's core lesson here is convergence. One facial expression is data. Multiple channels produce meaning. Start with the basic taxonomy of facial signals. Baseline expressions that reflect temperament, micro-expressions that flash for fractions of a second and often betray automatic effect, and expressive leakage, small asymmetries or delayed responses that show internal friction. Micro-expressions are real but rare and fleeting, so training to spot them matters only if you pair them with context and timing. The practical technique McCoy offers is a 3-step parsing method. Step 1. Anchor to baseline within 30 to 60 seconds. People reveal a normal expressiveness when relaxed. Note eye aperture, lip tension, and brow set. Step 2. Introduce a low-cost verbal probe, an observational comment that invites emotional content without threat. That looked like it bothered you. Do you want to unpack that? Step 3. Watch for immediate facial microchanges within the next 3 seconds. Did the eyes tighten? Did the mouth press? Did the expression unfold naturally or freeze? That 3-second window carries far more truth than a long interrogation because it is less susceptible to rehearsed lines. McCoy emphasizes muscles that matter. The orbicularis oculi, the eye muscles around a genuine smile, engage in authentic joy. Smiles that only lift the mouth without the eyes are often social routines. Brow furrows combined with tight lips suggest cognitive conflict or skepticism, but only if they appear consistently when information challenges a belief. The chapter offers useful calibration drills. Watch short interview clips with sound muted and try to label the emotional arc in 5-second slices. Then listen to validate. Next, practice the microprobe method in safe settings. Ask a colleague a neutral question and offer a low-cost personal reflection. Then watch the facial return for the 3-second truth signal. Importantly, McCoy warns against over-reliance on single cues and cultural blindness. Display rules vary across cultures and personalities, so always triangulate. Finally, he recommends a soft, ethical guardrail. When you suspect deception or private pain, default to care. A beard-tugging micro-expression that suggests anxiety is not an invitation to expose the person. It's an invitation to ask a quiet question and offer help. Faces give you speed, ethics give you safety. Chapter 3. Voice, Timing, and the Rhythm of Truth. If the face is the headline, the voice is the paragraph that provides nuance. Voice carries emotion through pitch, cadence, volume, and timing. McCoy treats voice as both a state indicator and a trait marker. Pitch rises often correlate with stress or uncertainty. Monotone pitch can signal boredom or practiced calm. Cadence reveals processing. Rapid bursts indicate excitement or rehearsed scripts, while measured pacing suggests deliberation and confidence. Volume is contextual. Louder is not always dominance. It can be anxiety with a compensatory push. One of the most underrated signals is timing, micropauses, latency between question and answer, and slight accelerations after a subject is mentioned. Pause is a particularly rich signal. A short, thoughtful pause before answering often indicates cognitive engagement. A flicker pause, an in and out inhale, may signal internal conflict or fabrication. McCoy gives a precise listening drill. In conversations, adopt the 30-second listening window. For each person you converse with, note 3 voice patterns in the first 30 seconds, pitch range, breathing cadence, and latency on new topics. These 3 simple metrics create a rapid voice profile that you can use to detect shift. When you ask a probing question, watch latency. Did the person answer immediately with a slight delay or with a long stall? Immediate answers are often habitual or rehearsed. Very long stalls often mean significant reappraisal or the need to construct a new narrative. Practice in low-stakes interviews, ask a friend about a minor event, and offer a surprising, mildly personal probe. Listen to latency and note whether the voice stabilizes or fragments. Chapter 4. Posture, Proximity, and the Social Map of Space. How someone occupies space tells you what they believe they deserve and how they wish to be treated. McCoy reframes proxemics and posture as ongoing negotiations. Open posture, shoulders back, chest slightly forward, feet planted, signals readiness and claim. Closed posture, arms crossed, torso rotated away, legs tucked, signals protection or low energy. Micro shifts matter. A sudden step back after a compliment reveals discomfort. A slight forward lean when you mention a shared value signals alignment. Proximity is equally informative. People calibrate distance based on trust, status, and cultural norms. In a low-stakes setting, a person who permits close proximity quickly often signals trust or social boldness. In a formal setting, permitting proximity can be a strategic rapport move. McCoy offers a useful proxemic experiment. In your next sequence of conversations, map the distance curve. Note the initial distance, any inward or outward shifts, and the moments that triggered movement. Tie those triggers to specific topics or emotional content. This map becomes a powerful predictive tool because distance shifts are less easily controlled than words. Posture is not static, it is kinetic. Chapter 5. Micro-behaviors. The small moves that reveal big patterns. Micro-behaviors are the tiny, often unconscious acts that accumulate into reliable patterns. McCoy calls them the slow data of human behavior, small repetitive moves that reveal preference, habit, and moral economy. Examples include the way someone arranges items on a desk, the rhythm of their social media comments, or the micro-delegations they make in meetings. While dramatic gestures are noticeable, micro-behaviors reveal consistent priorities. The first task is observation without interpretation. Spend 3 minutes watching a person's small rituals in a neutral setting, how they handle objects, where their gaze returns, the sequence they use to complete an action. Notice what they prioritize without asking why. Next, code the behavior into categories: ritual, economy, avoidance, or signaling. Rituals are repeated acts that reduce cognitive load. Someone who always sets a cup to the same spot likely values order or control. Economy moves are shortcuts. Delegating small tasks to save time indicates leverage thinking. Avoidance is detectable in delayed responses and repeated deferrals. Signaling involves choices meant for an audience, displaying a book on a shelf to suggest identity. Chapter 6. Patterns in conversation. What words really tell you? Conversation is a live wire of information. Words are obvious, but patterns in how people speak are where the real intelligence hides. Aidan McCoy teaches us to stop listening for quotes and start mapping conversational signatures, the repeating linguistic moves, the hedges, the pronoun choices, the rhythm of interruptions, and the small rituals that mark belonging or distance. The practical skill here is not to become a human transcript machine, it's to notice reliable conversational fingerprints and use them to form testable hypotheses about priorities, fears, and incentives. Start with pronouns. People who habitually use we in contexts of decision-making are signaling coalition thinking, either genuine partnership or a rhetorical move to diffuse responsibility. Conversely, persistent I usage can indicate ownership and agency or defensiveness when used to deflect critique. Track pronoun shifts across topics. Does someone switch from we when describing past successes to I when forecasting future risks? That shift often reveals who will be blamed if things go wrong. Next, look for hedging. Words like maybe, kind of, probably. Hedging is not always weakness, it's often a social lubricant that protects reputation and leaves room to pivot. But hedging, combined with lack of concrete follow-up actions, predicts low execution probability. McCoy suggests the 2-minute rule. If a person hedges and then fails to offer a single, concrete next step within 2 minutes, treat their commitment as ambiguous until proven otherwise. Repetition matters too. People repeat certain phrases like mantras. This is their rhetorical home base. Pay attention to which topics trigger repetition. Those are often identity anchors or reactive triggers. Another pattern is interruption rhythm. Interrupting politely, finishing someone's sentence or offering a quick affirmative paraphrase signals collaborative rapport. Cutting in with corrective facts or dismissive jokes signals dominance or impatience. Track who interrupts whom over a sequence of meetings. The interrupter is carving conversational territory and often seeks agenda control. Listen for sequencing. How people transition from data to story to value. Those who naturally move from facts straight to values are persuasive because they bridge reason to emotion quickly. Those who linger in analysis are risk-averse and will likely stall at execution. Micro-agreements are gold. Small, explicit agreements, let's test that next week, are predictive of follow-through more than broad optimism. When someone says, that sounds great, versus I will do X by Y, assume the latter matters. Also attend to disclaimers and apologies. Frequent, preemptive apologies, I might be wrong, but are often rhetorical humility cushioning a bold ask. Unmask them by watching subsequent behavior. Did the speaker actually hedge or do they execute boldly? McCoy gives a practical listening drill. In your next 3 conversations, pick one conversational pattern to track: pronoun shifts, hedges, interruptions, or micro-agreements. For each occurrence, write a 1-sentence hypothesis about what that pattern means for the person's likely behavior, and then test it with a low-cost follow-up. Ask for a specific example or set a tiny deadline. The act of testing converts interpretation into evidence. Remember that language is social. People perform differently in different roles. Promotional language among peers differs from candid talk in one-on-one windows. Calibrate for role. Finally, be ethical. Use conversational analysis to reduce friction, not to deceive. Ask clarifying follow-ups when you're unsure, and offer your reading as a question, not an accusation. When you treat words as signals to guide curiosity and small, verifiable experiments, conversation becomes a diagnostic tool rather than a guessing game. That's the conversational literacy McCoy wants you to build before moving on to the trickier realm of deception and intent. Chapter 7. Detecting Deception. A practical, ethical primer. Deception is the hardest signal to read because the human brain evolved to tell cooperative stories, not lie detect. McCoy's approach is deliberately pragmatic. There is no single tell that proves lying. There are clusters of inconsistent signals that raise probability and justify a gentle probe. The method begins with baseline. Before you can suspect deceit, you must know normal. How does this person typically breathe, blink, pause, and phrase sentences when relaxed and truthful? Establishing baseline requires minutes, perhaps multiple interactions. Once you have a baseline, look for leakage, small behavioral fragments that conflict with the baseline under similar conditions. Examples: a confident speaker who suddenly adds excessive qualifiers when describing their recent accomplishment, consistent eye contact that breaks only when discussing a specific topic, smiling that doesn't reach the eyes. Those mismatches matter because deception often requires cognitive load, fabricating details or suppressing truth, engages extra mental resources and produces micro-friction. McCoy warns against overweighting single cues. A delayed answer can mean thoughtfulness or a memory gap. An elevated pitch can mean stress, excitement, or a cold. Deception detection is about clusters, mismatched face plus evasive language plus avoidance of detail raises the likelihood enough to ask a careful question. Language patterns are particularly telling. Deceptive narratives tend to be either too short, lacking sensory detail, or too long and overly elaborate to fill perceived gaps. They also often include distancing language, fewer first-person references, more passive constructions. Ask for sensory specifics. When someone describes an event, a truthful speaker will usually offer small sensory anchors, colors, smells, incidental people. Fabricated accounts often avoid sensory textures because fiction requires more cognitive effort. Another practical tool is the micro trick. Request a chronological retelling backward. Ask someone to describe an event in reverse order. Fabricated stories are harder to construct backward and errors surface. Use this sparingly and ethically. It's a probe, not a trap. Physiological indicators, microexpressions, pupil dilation, changes in skin temperature can exist, but they're noisy and culturally variable. Rely on them only as part of a broader pattern. McCoy emphasizes the moral line. Suspicion without cause corrodes trust and invites projection. When your cluster suggests possible deception, prefer curiosity over accusation. Chapter 8. Forming and Testing Behavioral Hypotheses. The Scientist's Mindset. If people analysis is a skill, hypothesis testing is the method. McCoy flips the common script. Don't aim to be right. Aim to be quickly and cheaply less wrong. Formulate a one-sentence hypothesis from your observations. This person values control and will resist delegated tasks. The hypothesis must be falsifiable. Design a low-cost probe that would disconfirm it if wrong. For instance, assign a tiny, time-bounded delegation and watch for acceptance and follow through. The elegance of McCoy's method is in the micro-experiment. Small asks that reveal decision rules without risking relationships. Create a standard toolkit of probes, the low-cost commitment, a 15-minute follow-up call, the social proof nudge, Name a peer who has done something similar. The preference check. Offer 2 explicit options. And the reverse question. Ask them to describe what would make a proposal unacceptable. Each probe reveals different axes: risk appetite, social conformity, value signals. Track results meticulously. Keep a simple ledger: hypothesis, probe, observed response, interpretation, next step. Over time, this ledger becomes your learning database and prevents the classic human error of anecdotal overconfidence. McCoy also teaches layered testing. Start with soft probes, escalate only if stakes rise, and data remain ambiguous. Soft probes preserve goodwill and allow rapid iteration. When a probe fails, adjust rather than assume malice. Maybe your framing was off, the timing bad, or the person's incentives misaligned. Hypothesis testing reduces bias by forcing you into a feedback loop. To avoid confirmatory bias, deliberately design one probe that could disconfirm your favored reading and treat its data with equal weight. Chapter 9. Influence. Maps, reading, networks and power dynamics. People exist inside webs, networks of influence, favors, and implicit authority. McCoy's influence maps are simple but powerful diagrams that show who matters, how decisions flow, and where leverage lives. Start by identifying nodes, the people who hold resources, the connectors who bridge groups, and the gatekeepers who control access. Don't confuse title with influence. Informality often trumps formal hierarchy. Observe meetings and social channels. Who do others check with before speaking? Who receives quick deference or is copied on many threads? Those are influence signals. Map ties by strength, frequency of contact and depth of exchange, and by direction. Who seeks input from whom? Weak ties are surprisingly powerful. A peripheral connector can introduce you to fresh resources that formal leaders miss. Look for brokers who sit between clusters. These are leverage points because they can introduce ideas where others cannot. Another dimension is incentive alignment. Who benefits from current arrangements and who would benefit from change? Influence maps must visualize both social capital and vested interest. McCoy prescribes a practical mapping exercise. For a specific decision, draw a simple 3-tier map: decision makers, influencers, and blockers. For each node, note one observed leverage point, what they care about, a known pressure or a social obligation. Then design a minimal coalition strategy. One direct ask to a maker, one soft alignment move for an influencer, a thoughtful data point shared privately, and one neutralization plan for a blocker, a low-cost concession that removes immediate threat. Social momentum often depends on timing and sequencing. Align your asks so that influencers are pre-engaged before formal proposals land. Reputation is currency. Track reputational signals, public endorsements, repeat collaborations, and who people brag about working with. Use those signals to build trust slowly. Ask connectors for small introductions rather than grand favors. Always account for asymmetry. Power holders often have less to lose, so design proposals that reduce perceptual risk. Pilot projects, phased commitments, or neutral third-party audits. Influence maps also help with resilience planning. If a key node becomes unavailable, who can substitute? Build redundant pathways. McCoy's final counsel here is ethical. Use influence maps to create value, not to manipulate. The real leverage is when change benefits broader groups, and your map is a tool to design inclusive moves rather than extractive gambits. When you can read networks, you stop pushing against the tide and start steering currents intelligently. Chapter 10. Applying people analysis to decisions, negotiation, hiring, and leadership. Analysis without application is decoration. McCoy turns theory into operational protocols for three high-stakes domains: negotiation, hiring, and leadership. In negotiation, begin with the pre-negotiation map. Know the person's conversational style, decision rhythms, and influence network. Use calibrated probes early. Offer two concrete options that both move you toward value, and watch which one they pick. Their choice reveals priorities. Avoid binary ultimatums. Instead, create package offers that let the other party trade within your frame. Micro-behavior and voice cues guide when to push and when to yield. Tight jaw and backward shift signal a stop. Open palms and forward lean invite expansion. In hiring, treat interviews as hypothesis tests. Design role-specific behavioral probes, small work samples, short collaborative tasks, and a staged trial week. Observe micro-behaviors in these tasks. The candidate who volunteers clarifying questions likely communicates well. The candidate who avoids detail in a task avoids ownership. Use structured reference checks that ask about specific past behaviors rather than general praise. McCoy insists on multiple data points: interview, sample task, references, and brief team interaction. For leadership, people analysis informs delegation, feedback, and development. Map each team member's decision tempo and risk appetite. Align tasks so that ownership matches temperament. Leaders must practice active calibration. Give feedback framed as data plus next step, not moral critique. Use repair rituals publicly to model accountability. When a leader misreads a situation, acknowledge the error, state the learning, and adjust process. That models psychological safety and teaches the team how to adapt. Across domains, McCoy prescribes checklists, pre-negotiation, pre-hiring, and leadership decision lists that cover baseline behaviors, micro-probes to run, network nodes to consult, and ethical constraints. After decisions, perform a rapid post-mortem. What did the signals predict correctly? What diverged, and what will you adjust? This closed-loop learning is the engine of better calibration. Finally, maintain humility. People are not instruments, they are agents. Use your analysis to create fit, reduce friction, and design clearer commitments. McCoy's applied credo: make better decisions faster, but do so in ways that keep relationships intact and grow them over time. When you integrate the observational habits, hypothesis testing, and network maps into routine decision workflows, you turn people analysis from a side skill into core competitive advantage, one that produces fairer, faster, and more humane outcomes. Chapter 11. Building rapport. Fast, the science and art of instant trust. Building rapport quickly is not magic. It is a sequence of observable moves that lower threat, increase predictability, and create a small, mutual investment in the conversation. Aidan McCoy starts this chapter by dismantling myths. Rapport is not mere mimicry or flattery. It is coordinated vulnerability plus useful signal exchange that convinces the other person you are safe and competent to engage with. The practical architecture has three layers: signal alignment, meaningful micro-disclosures, and rapid reciprocity, and you can practice each one deliberately. First, signal alignment. People calibrate trust from low-cost converging signals across channels, matched tempo in speech, compatible energy in posture, and respectful proxemic distance. The principle is calibrated mirroring, not slavish imitation. Match tempo subtly. If someone speaks slowly and with measured breath, slow your cadence a notch. If they use hand gestures, let your hands be relaxed and present rather than frozen. Aligning signals reduces cognitive friction because the brain processes similarity as safety. McCoy gives a simple startup routine. In the first 30 seconds, register 3 patterns: speech tempo, dominant affect, warmth, urgency, reserve, and preferred interaction distance. Then modulate your behavior by about 10 to 15% toward those patterns. Small adjustments are detectable but not creepy. The second layer is meaningful micro-disclosure. Rapport is reciprocal. People trust faster when they receive personal but controlled information that signals realness. Micro-disclosures are brief, specific, and framed to invite equivalence. One line about a small struggle or recent learning, followed by a quick pivot to curiosity. I struggled with that too. How did you tackle it? This avoids oversharing while encouraging the partner to reciprocate. McCoy warns of the too much, too soon trap. Vulnerability without calibration triggers protective withdrawal. Instead, use the 2-step reciprocity rule. Offer one small fact about yourself, then ask for one small fact that is low cost for the other person to share. If they respond with a similar level of detail, proceed. If they remain closed, return to neutral topics and maintain warmth. The third layer is rapid reciprocity, concrete micro-actions that demonstrate attention and investment. This could be a short follow-up question referencing an earlier comment, a visible act of help offered immediately, or a tiny obligation accepted and fulfilled within 24 hours. Rapid reciprocity transforms pleasant talk into practical exchange and converts ephemeral rapport into a nascent trust loop. McCoy provides practice drills. In a set of 5 brief conversations, apply the 30-second signal alignment, then introduce exactly one micro-disclosure and finish by offering one small, concrete act of help within the next day. Track outcomes. Which sequence produced a follow-up or an exchange of contact details? Over time, you'll learn which combinations work in different contexts, e.g., professionals often respond better to competent signals plus small offers of utility, whereas community contexts prefer warmth plus shared narrative. He also emphasizes ethical clarity. Rapport must be used to build honest connection, not to manipulate or extract. Always ask yourself if the relationship you're cultivating respects the other person's agency and whether the small, reciprocal steps you request are aligned with mutual benefit. Practical pitfalls include over-mirroring, which feels robotic, and emotional dumping disguised as vulnerability. The corrective is simple: slow down, re-anchor to curiosity, and always close with a practical tie, a next small step, a resource shared, or a scheduling suggestion. Mastering rapid rapport accelerates information exchange and reduces wasted friction. It makes subsequent analysis less guesswork and more cooperative discovery. Chapter 12. Cold reading versus informed inference. When to use. Each McCoy draws a firm distinction between 2 modes of people analysis that novices often confuse. Cold reading, which stitches together generic statements and broad cues to create an illusion of insight, and informed inference, which uses specific, triangulated signals plus context to form testable conclusions. Cold reading can be effective in entertainment context because people fill gaps with their own meaning, but it is unreliable and ethically fraught in real decisions. Informed inference, by contrast, is slower, requires baseline data, and leads to verifiable predictions. The chapter's first lesson is diagnostic humility. Never jump to inference without a minimum of 2 converging signals from different channels: face plus voice, behavior plus context, historical data plus microprobe. McCoy prescribes a readiness checklist before you act on analysis. Do I have baseline observations? Do I have at least 2 different signals pointing the same way? Can I design a small probe to test this inference within 24 to 72 hours? If the answer is no to any item, treat your sense as tentative and either collect more data or ask a clarifying question. He then outlines the anatomy of effective inference: signal strength, how obvious is the sign; signal reliability, how consistent across situations; and signal specificity, how uniquely does it point to one explanation versus many. A trembling hand is high signal strength for arousal but low specificity. Arousal could be anger, excitement, cold, or caffeine. Pair it with narrowed pupils and a gaze aversion during a discussion about money, and specificity rises toward anxiety or deception. McCoy gives practical exercises to refine inference skills. One is the concentrated baseline drill. Spend 5 minutes in a neutral setting watching a person's normal breathing, blink rate, and gestural rhythm. Then introduce a mild, non-threatening probe, a harmless surprise or a light personal question, and record the micro-changes. Compare your initial inference against subsequent behavior over the next 48 hours. Did your reading hold? If not, which signal misled you? The chapter also examines the social costs of cold reading. Overconfident claims often erode trust when they're wrong. In professional contexts, such as hiring or evaluation, present your inferences as hypotheses with planned tests, not as conclusions. For crowd or negotiation contexts where you must move fast, favor neutral clarifying questions that convert your tentative inference into information the other person can correct. You seemed hesitant when we discussed the timeline. What's your main concern? This tactic both tests your inference and opens the possibility of repair. McCoy provides a short, ethical decision flow. If your inference could harm someone's status, privacy, or economic opportunities, do not act on it unless you can verify through objective means. Use inference to design better questions, allocate small responsibilities appropriately, or tailor communication style. Do not weaponize it. The chapter concludes with a practical calibration schedule, weekly reflection on 3 inferences you made, the probes you used, and the outcomes. Over time, your hit rate improves because you learn which signals in your environment are informative and which are noise. The skill is not being spooky, right? It is being reliably less wrong. Chapter 13, Longitudinal Patterns, from Single Encounters to Behavior Systems. Short-term readings are useful but insufficient for decisions that matter. McCoy emphasizes the power of longitudinal patterns, consistent behaviors that reveal underlying preferences, constraints, and decision rules. A single polite refusal means little. Repeated patterned refusals across contexts often indicate a boundary or capacity constraint. The chapter teaches how to build a small behavioral dossier over time that turns episodic signals into stable inference. Start with a disciplined data capture habit. After key interactions, log 1 observable behavior, the context, and the inferred meaning. Keep entries succinct and verifiable. Avoid emotional language that colors future interpretation. Over weeks, this dossier reveals trends. McCoy suggests mapping 3 categories: commitments, what the person consistently does; avoidance patterns, what they consistently avoid; and escalation triggers, events that predictably shift behavior. Use simple visual coding: green for fulfilled commitments, amber for tentative engagement, red for repeated avoidance. Visual maps help you spot clusters. Maybe a colleague meets deadlines when tasks involve direct client interaction but avoids internal administrative work. That pattern suggests motivation tied to external validation rather than intrinsic process enjoyment. The next step is causal probing. When a pattern emerges, design a micro-experiment that manipulates a single variable to test causality. For example, if someone avoids administrative tasks, offer a small administrative task packaged with a visible client benefit and observe. If engagement rises, motivation was likely tied to perceived external impact. If not, capacity or skill mismatch may be the issue. McCoy warns of the overfitting danger, reading meaning into coincidental clusters. Use counterfactuals to test robustness. Would the pattern hold in a different context? If not, your model is fragile. He offers a weekly synthesis ritual. Review 5 logged interactions, update the color-coded map, and write 1 sentence about whether the newly identified pattern should change how you assign responsibilities or open conversations. Longitudinal patterns also inform leadership decisions like promotion, training, and support structures. A person who consistently volunteers to mentor but drops execution tasks may be a strong culture leader, but a poor solo executor. Position them to amplify strengths rather than punish mismatches. Ethical practice is central. Maintain confidentiality of your dossier, avoid turning it into rumor fodder, and use it to align opportunities with genuine capacity rather than to exclude. The chapter ends with a metric pattern stability index, the proportion of observations in which a predicted behavior occurred across similar contexts. A high index increases confidence, a low index demands more probes. Building dossiers transforms people analysis from momentary judgment into strategic personnel craft that respects growth, nuance, and the slow emergence of consistent truth. Chapter 14. Cross-cultural calibration. Reading people beyond your frame. People analysis, built in one cultural context, often fails when applied elsewhere because display rules, proxemics, and conversational norms vary dramatically. McCoy argues that cultural humility must be a foundational practice. Assume your default interpretations are provisional in any unfamiliar social frame, and prioritize learning over quick inference. The chapter furnishes a practical 2-step calibration method. Observe, then ask. Observe for patterns across multiple people in the same context before you infer about any single individual. Is direct eye contact rewarded or avoided? Are interruptions a sign of engagement or disrespect? Does smiling signal warmth or social masking? Pattern-level observation prevents projecting your native norms onto others. The second step is structured inquiry. Use low-risk meta-questions that invite correction. In your team here, is it typical to ask straightforward questions in meetings or to share concerns in private? And then adjust your behavior immediately. McCoy emphasizes concrete cultural markers to watch: greeting rituals, handshake, bow, 2 kisses, silence norms. Is silence comfortable or is it a pressure point? Hierarchical signaling. How visibly do titles matter? And disclosure rules. How personal is acceptable in small talk? For example, in some cultures, Asking about family demonstrates respect and interest. In others, it can be intrusive. He suggests a calibration checklist for international or diverse teams. Meet 2 cultural mentors, run 3 observational sessions, and document 5 behavioral norms before making policy decisions that affect the group. Language matters beyond words, idioms, humor, and directness differ. Chapter 15. Ethics, Consent, and Responsibility in People. Analysis, in the craft of analyzing people, carries ethical weight. Accurate insight can help or harm, and the analyst's responsibility is to use skill in ways that respect autonomy, dignity, and consent. McCoy closes this segment by proposing an explicit ethical framework, transparency, proportionality, and repair, that should guide all applied analysis. Transparency means being open about the purpose of observation when it materially affects someone's opportunities or welfare. If you're evaluating candidates, tell them what you'll observe and why. If you're piloting behavioral probes, disclose general intent and offer opt-out mechanisms. Consent in people analysis is contextual. Some environments, public speeches, crowded events, permit observational inference without explicit consent, but decision-making situations that impact a person's job, finances, or reputation require explicit consent and documented criteria. Proportionality demands that the depth of analysis match the stakes. A sales call doesn't justify intimate personality dossiers. A hiring decision might. Use the least intrusive method that yields adequate confidence. McCoy recommends an internal proportionality test. Ask if the data you gather would be acceptable to share with the person being analyzed were they to request it. If the answer is no, reassess the method. Repair is the duty when error occurs. Analysts will be wrong sometimes. The remedy is prompt correction, apology, and structural changes to prevent recurrence. Chapter 16. Situational adaptation, shifting readings across contexts. People are not one-dimensional. They are context-sensitive systems that change behavior depending on role, stakes, and social script. Aidan McCoy teaches that true analysis requires not only reading signals, but translating them through the situational lens. The practical core idea is simple. Every observable is a function of person times context, and your job is to estimate which factor dominates. Start by cataloging common situational frames you encounter: interviews, conflict de-escalations, sales pitches, family dinners, crisis meetings, and note the usual performance pressure in each. Performance pressure amplifies strategic behavior because people manage impressions. Low-pressure contexts reveal habit. In practice, build a mental situational checklist before you analyze any behavior. Role signal: what role is the person enacting? Temporal signal: is this an opening, midpoint, or closing move? And relational signal: what relationship history shapes this moment? Use that checklist to reweight cues. A short delayed answer in a high-stakes pitch could be rehearsed caution. The same delay in small talk might simply be distraction. McCoy provides a rule of adaptation. Invert your prior when context shifts dramatically. If someone who is usually open becomes closed in a negotiation, treat the change as information about the negotiation, not about an immutable personality flaw. This inversion prevents overfitting and preserves flexible strategies. Another practical move is the context probe. When signals are ambiguous, ask a situationally framed question that isolates context-driven motives. How would you like us to handle this in a way that preserves your team's standards? That invites the person to reveal the operative constraints and recalibrates your analysis. Context also includes environmental affordances, time limits, audience presence, and physical setup. A speaker behind a podium may appear formal and distant because the lectern creates psychological distance. A walk-and-talk format will elicit different micro-behaviors. Read the architecture as part of the behavioral equation and use environmental redesign to test hypotheses. Change seating, move to a private space, or remove an audience and watch signals shift. McCoy emphasizes adaptation over categorization. Avoid labeling people fixed types. Instead, develop repertoire maps, behavioral options you deploy depending on context. One set for cooperative design sessions, another for negotiating scarce resources, and a third for crisis triage. Practically, practice with deliberate role switching. In 5 patterned interactions this week, deliberately change the context by varying time pressure, audience or stakes, and record how the person's micro-signals respond. Chapter 17. Coaching for Change. Turning analysis into development. Analysis is most valuable when it improves outcomes for both parties. McCoy teaches how to convert diagnostic insight into practical coaching that fosters growth without shaming. The first step is permission. Never turn analysis into correction without consent. Frame your intervention as a collaborative experiment. I've noticed X pattern. Would you be interested in trying a small tweak to see if it changes outcomes? This preserves autonomy and increases receptivity. Next, translate behavior into micro goals. Big labels like be more confident are vague. Actionable coaching specifies one observable change. For example, increase forward lean frequency during client pitches from 10% to 30% of the time, or use 2 sensory details when recounting a project. Micro goals are measurable and easy to rehearse. McCoy suggests a 3-part coaching cycle: observe, experiment, reflect. Observe is the data-gathering phase where you document the specific behavior. Experiment is a short trial, 1 week, 1 meeting, where the coachee tries the new behavior in low-risk settings. Reflect is a structured review of what changed and why. Provide concrete practice drills tied to real contexts, role plays, timed speaking turns, or script rewrites, and ensure feedback is immediate and specific. Language matters in coaching. Chapter 18. Predictive Modeling. From anecdote to forecast. Moving from anecdotal reading to reliable forecasting requires formalizing observations into predictive models. McCoy emphasizes parsimony. Models should be as simple as necessary to predict outcomes reliably. Start by choosing a target behavior you care about: on-time delivery, negotiation acceptance, or promotion readiness, and identify 3 predictors you believe influence it based on prior observation. Use the behavioral dossier technique to quantify predictors. Code them 0/1 across cases for simplicity. Over time, you'll accrue data and can measure which predictors correlate with outcomes. For example, prompt email response, concrete micro-agreements, and visible follow-through history might together predict on-time delivery with high likelihood. The modeling exercise is iterative: test, calibrate, prune. McCoy advises a validation ritual. When you build a model from 10 past cases, test it prospectively on 5 new cases and measure prediction accuracy. Use simple metrics like precision and recall. Did you correctly predict good outcomes and avoid false positives? This disciplined approach turns intuition into defensible forecasting. Another key modeling move is weighting signals. Not all predictors are equal. Assign weights based on observed predictive power. A consistent micro-behavior across context may deserve higher weight than a fleeting micro-expression. McCoy recommends tracking signal decay too. How predictive is a behavior after 1 week, 1 month, or 6 months? Use decay rates to update your model dynamically. Chapter 19. Organizational Applications, Culture, Structure, and People Analytics. People analysis scales inside organizations when individual-level insight informs system-level design. McCoy lays out how to embed observational practice into hiring, onboarding, team design, and leadership development without creating surveillance or paranoia. First, standardize observation rubrics for consequential processes. For hiring, specify 3 observable behaviors tied to job success and require structured work samples that elicit those behaviors. For performance reviews, prioritize longitudinal dossiers over single interviews. Documented patterns beat impressionistic judgments. Second, design role-fit metrics that combine micro-behavior signals with context needs. Match people who consistently seek interpersonal validation with client-facing mentorship roles rather than solitary execution tasks. Third, use micro-experiments at scale. A/B test onboarding rituals or meeting formats and measure engagement signals. McCoy warns about ethical data governance. Store behavioral data securely, anonymize when used for research, and ensure consent where appropriate. In culture work, teach teams simple observational rituals, daily 1-sentence pulse checks and weekly reflection rounds that normalize calibrated feedback and reduce misinterpretation. Chapter 20, The Lifelong Craft, Habits, Tools, and the Analyst's Practice. Mastery of people analysis is a slow, cumulative craft built from daily habits, thoughtful tools, and continual reflection. McCoy offers a practical practice architecture: daily micro-observation, weekly synthesis, monthly model updates, and quarterly ethical reviews. Daily micro-observation is simple. Record 1 clear, verifiable behavior and 1 context note. Over time, these entries fill your dossier and reveal patterns. Weekly synthesis requires you to review 5 entries and write 1 testable hypothesis to probe the following week. Monthly model updates let you adjust predictor weights and remove signals that decay. Quarterly ethical reviews invite peers to audit your dossiers and to ensure consent and proportionality remain intact. Tools matter. Use lightweight trackers, voice memos, and simple spreadsheets rather than elaborate software that creates data hoarding temptation. McCoy emphasizes reflective practice. After key decisions, run a short post-mortem focused on signal accuracy. Which cues predicted outcome, which misled, and what systemic changes would reduce error going forward. Commit to always asking us corrective question. If I were wrong here, what would I have misread? That humility-centered routine is the single best error correction process. Build community, find 2 or 3 peers who practice similar skills, and run monthly calibration sessions where you share anonymized cases and critique inferences. Peer review reduces echo chambers and surfaces cultural blind spots. Finally, cultivate ethical identity. Let transparency, proportionality, and repair be as central to your practice as accuracy. People analysis is powerful. Wield it to create environments where better fit and clearer expectations reduce suffering and increase flourishing. Conclusion: a compact practice plan to begin today. Start with a 7-day micro-practice. Day 1. Pick one person and record 3 baseline signals: face, voice, posture, and 1 context note. Day 2, run a low-cost probe tied to a simple hypothesis and record the response. Day 3, repeat with a second person and compare patterns. Day 4, synthesize your 2 dossiers and write 1 testable model. Day 5, run a small social experiment, alter a meeting format or seating, and observe signal shifts. Day 6, perform a mini-ethical audit. Would your observations be acceptable to share if asked? Day 7, reflect, adjust your heuristics, and plan your next week of probes. Keep the cycle small, iterative, and consent-minded. Over months, you will accumulate dossiers, refine forecasts, and turn people analysis from a skill into a humane competency that yields clearer decisions and kinder interactions.